As they say in hockey, let's do that hockey.
Play a full 60 minutes.
Yeah, I'm just trying to keep it simple.
Get pucks deep, bring the puck deep, put pucks in deep.
We got to keep it simple and just get pucks going forward.
Getting into the forecheck.
We got to keep playing aggressive.
Trying to take away their time and space.
We're focused on tonight. We just got to stick to our game.
We've hit the month of April, and the calendar is slammed. No matter what type of sports fan you are, you've got something to watch between March Madness coming to a close, Masters weekend, and the upcoming NHL playoffs, currently amidst the playoff race. And don't count out the NCAA Frozen Four. We're going to talk a little bit about all of those. Welcome back to the Fifth Liners Hockey Podcast with Matt Leonardo. I'm Casey Ditzel, and the Marathon Man is gearing up here, Maddie. How's the marathon training? We got, a week and a half, 10 days or so until you're going to be hoofing it around Boston.
It's 15 days from today, so April 21st is the latest it could possibly be. Patriots Day always falls on the third Monday of the year, or of April, so about as late as it could possibly be, which is great for me, given the little bit of the injury bug fell into February, but we're back into full swing on training, and we feel really good going into it.
What's the farthest you've ran so far in your training?
I did a half. Ran it pretty well, actually. Probably early to mid-February. Then went on the shelf. Was supposed to get another 15 to 20 miler in, but only got back up to about 10 and a half. So gotta just finish the miles at that point. I think we're kind of in a mentality of just get from A to B. I don't really mind how long it takes, as long as they don't start packing things up and shopping out all the vendor stuff by mile 15. But no, I feel pretty good about it.
So what's the max time you could possibly have? Are you going to be walking out there?
Oh no, I'm going for a full run. I think the max. So I start at 11:15, and they'll start closing the course behind me at about 5:30. So I've got 6 hours and 15 minutes in theory. I'm aiming for 3:34, somewhere in that range. So we'll see. I should have plenty of time.
That's pretty quick.
Should have plenty of time to get it. I've been pacing around 3:15 on a lot of my training runs, but obviously, got to extend that beyond the half marathon. So we'll see. I might get some adrenaline rush. The first 12 miles are downhill, so that's kind of my hopeful to pick up a couple extra seconds a mile there, and then dreadingly run up through Heartbreak Hill over at Boston College. And once I see Fenway Park, I'm sprinting. It's all guns from there.
So I almost ran a half marathon this weekend, cold turkey. My roommate was planning on running the Potsdam half marathon. His friend withdrew, so I had a free bib to run, and then my roommate backed out, which was I was not too upset to hear, because I think it would have been I would have been losing sleep over it the night before. But we're all rooting for you. We're going to be checking the mile splits and actively posting while that's going down. Let's update our fantasy hockey here, and it did not go well for either of us. You and me are playing in the fifth place consolation game right now, and I think it's the Dogs who are going to be the number 5 team, but both of us knocked out. The injury bug absolutely decimated my team, as well as some very poor GMing, a trade for Matthew Tkachuk right at the Four Nations when I thought I was going to get a deal for him being on the IR. Turns out he wasn't coming back for the season, so I handed out Brandon Hagel for free. And that pretty much wrapped up my season right there.
Yeah, no, I have 2 fairly competitive leagues, and I think our scoring format's 10 a goal, 7 an assist, or 8 a goal, 7 an assist, something around there. I lost both by a combined 20 points. So in theory, I lost by a goal in each game. Pretty disappointing, as somebody who made the playoffs in both, was the number 1 seed in my other league. I think it was the 5 or the 4 seed in our league. Just ran into better competition in both. I think I had the second highest points in both the weeks that I lost. You can only put your best foot out there, and sometimes the defense just doesn't play. I couldn't play some fantasy hockey defense, which not much control on my back end, but we'll come again next year a lot harder. I'll tell you that much.
Well, that's another thing you and I have in common there. I played against the top scorer on the week. He also broke his highest score of the season by 150 points for the week. Of course, the week I played him, and I think I was right up there. You and me easily should have advanced here and would have been competitive this week. I'm in a battle right now. I got the first round bye in my other league, and it is 606.75 to 604.5. I've now edged a 2-point lead. I was down 50 going into Sunday here, and I'm going to be squeezing my cheeks a little tight throughout the rest of the recording as we watch the scores come in. But March Madness is another one on the fantasy side. How's your March Madness brackets? You got any that have a chance left? I know you were running one of the pools that I was in. Your fundraiser.
I went Tennessee all the way. Parents are season ticket holders. Shout out to both of them. But big following throughout the whole year. And I knew they didn't have the shooting to do it, but I really just kind of wanted to see it. Every year I'm like, you know what? I'm going to pick teams that I want to see win. And Tennessee and St. John's were those this year. And obviously neither of them were playing basketball this weekend. So for everyone who went with the chalk 1 seeds, congratulations. I hope you had a lot of fun making your brackets this year. And for me, who had a little bit more fun in mind, we'll try again next year. It's going to be pretty much the same every year of me. Typically by about middle of the Sweet 16, my bracket's almost at 0 points projected. So it's a pretty rough going on the March Madness side.
I made the best bracket in the history of me making brackets this year. We shout out Professor Jeremy, who's a loyal listener of the Fifth Liners podcast. Our midterm in my sports analytics class was to create an algorithm that would predict the March Madness bracket using some sort of analytics. I had 5 wrong picks going into the Final Four. I was in the 99.9th percentile, and from the Sweet 16 on, so actually from after day 1 of the round of 32, I was 20 points out of the lead to one of the girls in my class who was raised her hand on Monday when he asked who had never made a March Madness bracket before. We had the exact same picks from the Sweet 16 on, had 13 of the Sweet 16, the entire Elite Eight, a perfect Final Four, and then show that my algorithm, I'm a Florida Gators fan all the way, but the algorithm chose Auburn and Duke. So RIP to that one. But either way, if it would have been Auburn and Duke winning, I probably would have been up there. I think we were ranked in like the top 40,000 in the country out of 25 or 30 million brackets, however many there are. I could have gone 2 more perfect picks and I still wouldn't have won my class pool of 17 people, which was a pretty demoralizing thought when I did the math on that. But now we look forward to our final exam, and I'm going to warn you right now, the dogs are coming back fast and furious, because my final project is crafting a fantasy hockey algorithm for draft day next September. So close your eyes and clench your cheeks, because the dogs are going to be ferocious, and I'm coming in with way more preparation. I'm not going to be upset like I was walking out of this year's draft. I think it was over from day 1 when I underestimated the draft talent that I was going up against, and watched just about every one of my picks get stolen right before I had the 1-2 turn. Not this time. I am coming. With that, I think it's time to talk some hockey, buddy. And perfect timing. We were going to record this episode earlier in the week. We decided to wait a little bit to hopefully have Jake hop on, but ends up being you and me. Well, as that happens, Alex Ovechkin is on, well, it's the greatest scoring streak in history, a 5-game goal streak. He scores against Buffalo and Boston and Carolina all earlier this week, puts up 2 against the Blackhawks. And today, on Sunday, the show will drop Monday, but as we record, Alex Ovechkin is now the greatest goal scorer in history, as Wayne Gretzky passed the torch over to him, 895. And let's start with the goal. A phenomenal, just classic Alex Ovechkin rifle of a shot. It wasn't a one-timer, but a rocket of a wrist shot, and the celebration, you can almost guarantee, is going to be a statue somewhere outside of wherever Washington's next rink is when they build that.
Yeah, I mean, it's the best thing in the world to see that it came at Ovechkin's circle on the left side. I feel like every rink should have a little number 8 somewhere on that left circle on either side of the ice, just because that's now property of Alexander Ovechkin. I mean, what an unbelievable story here, right? Like, everyone was talking about, like, is he going to break it this season? He breaks his leg, doesn't play, comes back. He's still on an absolute heater. This man's an absolute machine, right? Like, he's cranking beers after every single one of these games, right? He took Ryan Leonard out to circle, or what was it, winter circle out in Boston, when he got called up to the team literally on Monday. He was out at a bar singing his little Bandzamaker dance song, and then he's putting up a goal a game for the last 2.5 weeks to not only beat Gretzky, but beat the amount of games he did it in, right? Because I think they're both at 897 games at this point, or probably more than that. But I think I saw the stat where they're at the exact same amount of games played. But Ovechkin obviously has the one more goal now. So what an absolute horse. I mean, he's 38 years old. He broke his leg this year and he put up 42 goals. Like, an unbelievable season. And just a great opportunity to just kind of step back and appreciate what we're watching, right? Like, this is truly history. And obviously, like, our generation has been able to see a ton of amazing sports history, but this might be one of, if not the greatest features, because of how genuine shock around the world of, like, is anyone ever going to catch Wayne Gretzky in the number of goals he scored, right? I think the next one you think about is, does somebody ever catch Barry Bonds and his 773 home runs? And, like, that seems like an outlandish thing, right? But 894 goals is just absurd. And for him to do it the way he did it, and for how long he played and how consistent he was, it's just unbelievable.
Well, and a great touch there. Even cooler that it is in the exact same amount of games. And he had a chance to do it one game earlier when, as we look back on Friday against the Blackhawks, and the odds on the hat trick were astronomical. It easily could have been. He waves off Spencer Carberry and says, "No, I don't want it. I don't want to go and score the hat trick goal on home ice in front of the home crowd." That would have been absolutely bonkers. He says, "No, I'll wait," and does it on the island on the road. It was basically a home crowd there, but what a decision. I mean, Matt, in your eyes, which one would have been cooler? I still think that the empty net hat trick goal would have been a perfect touch, but obviously a pretty class move that he wanted to score on a goaltender, since all year the narrative around him has been that he only scores on the empty net. And even crazier when you look back at that goal streak. He's on 6 goals in the last 5 games. Every single one of them have been either 5-on-5 or power play goals with a goalie in the net. No empty nets in that category.
Yeah, I think I saw the stat where I think he has 9 more empty net goals in his career than Wayne Gretzky. And for the narrative of an empty net merchant for having 9 more goals, it's just kind of ridiculous. But it's tough call either way. I think getting it on home ice at the end of a game where you know you're going to win is probably a better option. Obviously, Ovechkin wanted a goalie in the crease there, and I think they were down 2-1 when he ended up scoring it. So being on the road, breaking that record in Long Island as opposed to Washington, like, I think it's a tough decision either way. But at the end of the day, like, he got the goals. He's officially the all-time leading goal scorer, a record that we talked about. Who could ever break that? Now I really am questioning who the hell could ever break this one, right? Like, I feel like we're at a point where, this feels super unbreakable. It felt unbreakable the last 35, 40 years, but this one I feel a little better about. What was funny was he wanted to score it on a goaltender, and after the game, first of all, he scored on Sorokin, which I believe it was his first career goal against Ilya Sorokin, one of the rare active goaltenders who had not given up an Alex Ovechkin goal. He goes into the locker room after the game and asks Ilya Sorokin to sign his stick and give it to Ovechkin after he puts up the 895. And Sorokin, a fellow Russian, of course, agrees to it. But what an unbelievable story on that side. What was he going to have?
Did you see the speech?
I didn't see the speech.
Did you catch what he said in what maybe an all-time great quote there? He's thanking everybody, his teammates. He mentions Oshie and all the guys from that cup run. And then he goes, "Ilya, thanks for letting me get one on you. Love you for that, buddy." Just a kind of slap in the back, but they're buddies on the side, both from Russia. And and close friends there, but that is too funny. The first goal that he scores against his friend is the record breaker, and it kind of is a good thing. I was thinking of it, if the Islanders are a couple points forward, imagine you're in the heart of a playoff race, just dying to get a couple points here, trying to fight to scratch and claw your way forward. This happens, and then you have a 35-minute pause in the middle of the second period. The Islanders end up coming away with a 4-1 victory. So obviously it didn't phase them too much, but their playoff hopes are just about over. We go back a couple games before the Blackhawks game. It was Carolina where he got himself within 3 of the record in 144 minutes of penalties amongst the game. It was an absolute madhouse in the third period, and a lot to break down throughout that game. And let's start with the big one. It was the Jalen Chatfield, whatever you want to call it, between a slew foot MMA tackle takedown of Connor McMichael as they're in a fight. They both dropped the gloves, and presumably Chatfield didn't want to fight. He's not a fighter. He grabs the jersey, slings out his foot, and wraps him around, throwing him to the ice mat. No repercussions, no fines, no suspension given out to Chatfield. First, what were your thoughts on the play? I was thinking it was going to be a pretty long suspension coming for him, but he gets out scot-free.
He shouldn't be played until 2027, if we're being honest. I mean, I'm somebody in the realm of like, I understand if you're not a fighter, right? Chatfield's not a big guy. And like, I mean, Connor McMichael himself either is not somebody that you should be super scared of in a fight to begin with. I mean, yes, I would be very scared of Connor McMichael in a fight. But if you're Jalen Chatfield, you've been in the NHL for 4 or 5 years, like, you should be able to stand up to a guy who's in his second year and probably one of his first career NHL fights. But as a player how dirty of a play that is, and exactly what you're doing. And I think that really adds an element to this of you knew what you were going to do had a very risky potential, regardless of what happened to McMichael after the fact. I haven't seen the reports afterwards on how his leg is doing, but that's a super dirty play, right? It's almost similar to you see a guy on the boards and you envision like the little 12-year-old kid who's got the little stop sign on the back of his jersey. Like, to not just absolutely clean his clock into the boards when he's got his head down, because like there's serious injury potential there. And as a hockey player, like, I would be super upset if I were Connor McMichael, because I think it's just an extremely dangerous thing to do, especially even towards yourself, right? You get the skates up in the air like that, and you don't know who's going to be around there. Maybe a referee gets caught with a skate, and it's just I thought it was something that was absolutely worthy of suspension. I'm surprised that there was no discipline after the fact, and I'm surprised that not many, I don't know if there was as much of a standing up for that specific play as there was just like an absolute gone show of a game that turned into, but I thought that was a very dangerous play.
And the reason given was that there's no examples to pull from of why that would be a suspension. And you would think that would be a perfect scenario to drop, hey, here's an example of going forward, you can't do this. But, and even as a Hurricanes fan, I am completely surprised that there was no suspension. And every, replay of it, the pictures that come out just make it look worse and worse and worse on the play there. I would have thought 2, 3, 5 games, maybe even a 10 up to the playoffs. Maybe not as harsh as you were there with rest of the season, but certainly a surprise. On top of that, you've got just about everybody else on the ice ejected from the game. Did you see the video of the storm surge after with I think they had 14 players left and half the circle covered, but that's going to be a heck of a playoff matchup. Right now, the Capitals a pretty clear number 1 in the Metropolitan Division, and Carolina looks like they've solidified number 2. That could easily be a second round matchup. I think the Caps are going to get bounced in the first round, but either way, we're going to see the rematch of this on Thursday night, April 10th. I think the Carolina Hurricanes should be absolutely terrified. And before the Chatfield hit even happens, in the first period, Tom Wilson is barking, and credit Brian Boucher, who's in between the benches on the TNT broadcast. He's announcing everything that's going back and forth. And in the first period, Tom Wilson, I think, might be the scariest human being in sports. But start there. But Brian Boucher says Tom Wilson just told the Carolina Hurricanes bench somebody's getting hurt tonight. I'm like, oh geez. Then the fights start flying. Tom Wilson every single shift is dropping a shoulder. And in the third period, before the Chatfield incident happens, he's barking at Sebastian Aho, who took a little bit of a slash to him that wasn't called a penalty. And he's saying, who's going to protect you when I come for you? That's Carolina's. If Aho's done, Carolina's done for the playoffs. And certainly I'm sure the Capitals would love to see that injury happen. Then Tom Wilson gets kicked out of the game. All the fights start ensuing. Then the Chatfield thing happens. Well, now he's seen all these replays. I can't imagine if I'm Eric Tulsky, Rod Brindamore, anybody in the Canes organization, I'm putting Chatfield on the ice. He sat in their Saturday night game. He was a healthy scratch. I would certainly healthy scratch him again so that he doesn't go anywhere near the Capitals. But Matt, if you're a player anywhere near the ice on the Carolina Hurricanes, there's no way you're excited to put your pads on unless you're maybe Seth Jarvis, who seems like an absolute lunatic and says he's ready to go.
Yeah, you got to have your wires crossed before you even get on the ice at this point. Like, you got to have your head on a swivel. You got to know as a player, you're not making any passes towards the middle. Everything's staying on the outside. You're finishing every check that you can, and you're walking out of that 60 minutes hoping to stay alive. I think it was funny. I was chatting with a fellow ref of mine who one of his I think it was his brother who actually played in the league for a couple of seasons. And it was back in the 70s when, you know, the bully of the Philadelphia Flyers were the Philadelphia Flyers. And it was one of those things where they'd show up to play against the Flyers and the goal would basically just be, okay, let's walk out with no major injuries. Okay. I can get dinged up for a couple weeks, but I can't have any major. And that would be the goal of the game, not to win, but to just walk out of there with your arms and legs still functioning. I think if you're a Carolina Hurricanes player, you're probably having the same mentality. But I'd love to see if there's somebody down in that bottom six who's going to step up and take a body and kind of be somebody who's like going to stand up to the bully that is Tom Wilson. It's funny you said one of the scariest players in all of sports. Who else makes that list for you? I'd love to hear a top three impromptu, because I've got definitely a few guys that I do not want to see across from me, even at the grocery store.
Just straight off the knob here. That's on the spot. Well, he's won by, I would say, Ryan Reeves would be up. I'm gonna have to go straight hockey because I can't think.
I'll merge some sports for you then. Don't worry. If you give
go.
us some
I'm
good
trying to think
ones.
football. It's got to be like, man, who are some scary line? It's got to be like a.
It's Ray Lewis. I mean, that's my football.
Ray
one,
Lewis
like.
would be up there. I'm trying to think who's the active. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to.
We're
gonna have to come back to this one. We're gonna have to put this one on the notes list for next week and regroup. All right, what would be some that come off your list here?
I mean, yeah, I mentioned Ray Lewis. I mean, Ed Reed, a lot of those 2000s Miami to Baltimore Ravens football players that were going for heads. I mean, Ray Lewis may or may not have killed a man. We allegedly. You look at guys in the league right now, like Aziz Al-Shahir is the guy who just decapitated Trevor Lawrence for no reason this year. Like that's a guy I don't really want to see. I would say the majority of rugby players in like the Aussie Football League, like those guys are not only just enormous, but they are so athletic. Like it's just, I mean, I'm 5'10", maybe 5'11", and about $165. Like I'm getting murdered by everybody there. So that's a sport. And then, I mean, I watched the college wrestling championships a few weeks back when Minnesota guy Gable Stevenson lost, and he's what? Maybe 5'7", 5'8", but he's all 275 and looks like he actually could rip me in half. So It's definitely, I can come up with a good top 10 trying to mix in sports, and we'll add that to our episode list next week. If you're listening,
Dennis Rodman would be a good one.
Yeah, Malice at the Palace.
Dennis Rodman is my hero when I play intramural floor hockey. I think I probably lead Clarkson in history of intramural ejections. I've been canned from 5 games over my 3-year career playing in intramural floor hockey. Last year, twice there was fist fights, and I was the center of it. Can't help being the big guy in front of the net and trying to be an absolute brick to move. Sometimes people get upset when you're trying to move a lot of mass there. But
as a former floor hockey goalie myself, I'd probably be giving you a couple cross checks to get out of my crease if I saw you standing in front.
Actually, next time Nick Kojan comes on, Nick Kojan probably will never come back on this show after what I've done to him the last 2 weeks. I was subbing against his team, and I thought he saw me coming. He didn't see me coming. I run onto he's like standing in the slot, walking forward, and I was running in from the side, and I got him shoulder to chest and absolutely cartwheeled him, and he was not happy with it. And I said, I felt so bad after I did it, but I thought it was pretty funny. And I said, I'm not going anywhere near you.
I'll text him a wellness check, and I'll text him a wellness check tonight, see how he's doing.
But yeah, Tom Wilson is definitely, I would say, number 1 all time on my list for that. Matt, so the Gr8 Chase is over here now, and the big goal has gone in. Now we look forward to the postseason, and the Caps have clinched their spot, and they've been clinched. They were the first team in. Now with 107 points, they're 11 clear of the Hurricanes. And going into the final week here, they've clinched the number 1 seed in the Metro for sure with 5 games left. Do you think that this chase has impacted their chances in the postseason? And I would say that, and you look at the way they've played the last 2 weeks since they've clinched, Ovechkin has been the center of all of the attention. And even on the ice, every pass play is trying to feed him for that one-timer. Their whole power play is just trying to feed him. Now you have to kind of regroup and go to that playoff hockey style. How big of a distraction and a detriment, if any, do you think that is? Or do you think the Caps will move on just fine and breeze through like they have in the regular season?
I honestly think it's been a positive impact, and I've got a couple of reasons why. I think, first of all, I understand the whole idea of like we can't just leave our offense through Alexander Ovechkin, but it's worked for the last 20 years, right? Like, I think this team has for a while been very oriented on the fact of, okay, we're on the power play. Let's go put Ovi in the left circle and try and get him a 1T. And I think there's a lot of teams who are trying to do, like I think Todd McClellan did it over in Detroit, where you're getting a lot more cycle and a lot more motion in the power play. But when you've got a Merchant on that left side, you're not moving him anywhere. And I think it's obviously worked for quite some time, and I think it's going to continue to work into the playoffs. But the more and more I've watched this Capitals team, I think there's 2 things that this run has kind of solidified for me. I think the first is that this is such a cohesive group, which is extremely impressive for a kind of what I would want to say a mishmash team, right? I think they were super underwhelming last season. I think they were one of the worst goal differential teams to make the playoffs last year, but they still were able to sneak in there and get a little bit of confidence coming into this season and get some of their younger players some opportunities to play playoff hockey. And now this season, you've seen them click on all cylinders. They've upgraded that defense. Logan Thompson definitely needs to improve over the next 2 or 3 weeks. I think he's looked really bad in the last month or so, but I think
he was shaken up too before that is probably part of the reason. You wonder maybe health plays a little bit of a factor too.
Yeah, I think if they can solidify some goaltending, whether it's him or Charlie Lindgren between the pipes, I think they play a style of playoff hockey that, they've got big enforcing guys. They're a team you don't want to see in the playoffs, and you've got guys like Tom Wilson. I mean, Ovechkin's 3rd all time in the NHL in hits all time, and right there's some other big guys in that bottom 6 who've got a lot of experience too, right? Like you think of a guy up the middle like Nick Dowd. Like I think that's somebody who's a huge X factor for a team like this who's been on the cup team, seen some playoff experience, right? Like, I think this team has a lot of the pieces that you look for in a playoff hockey team. But again, the question is going to be, can this goaltending step up and help them move on? Because I think regardless of how solid your team is, right? Like, if you're not being able to make saves, like it's going to be a long playoffs run for you. And especially too, given where they are in the standings, I think it's going to be really interesting to see which team they end up facing up against as the wild card too. Because whatever team it is, right now Montreal's got a 4-point lead on the Rangers, 5 on the Islanders, 6 on Columbus and Detroit. Whatever team that is, they're going to have to play good hockey towards the end of the season in order to get that last spot. It's still pretty much a dog race to get to that last spot. Whatever team they're going to get, they're probably going to get one of, if not the hottest teams in the Eastern Conference coming into the playoffs. So I definitely think it's going to be more of a challenge in the sense that you're going to have to play a team that's fired up and more than likely a team that hasn't seen playoff ice in quite some time. But I think if you're the Capitals, right, like the team just feels so cohesive right now and they're getting some of the best play out of some of their guys, right? Like PLD has looked great all season. Dylan Strome, Alexei Protas has played unbelievable. That blue line looks really great. Jacob Chikrin is really stepping up into that role. He got a huge extension a week or two ago. So I think the Capitals are really in a great spot. It's just going to be, it's going to come down to goaltending for them, in my opinion.
We'll move on and we'll save the predictions for next week, our playoff preview, as we'll have the finalized bracket and everything to break down. And we'll put the Gr8 Chase behind us for now. Under the radar, another star of the same caliber with another outstanding achievement, and it was completely washed over just about, but Sidney Crosby passed Wayne Gretzky for the most point per game seasons, 20 straight point per game seasons for Sidney Crosby. And just bat a couple eyes at the accomplishment that is. Wayne Gretzky is just about being erased off the history of hockey here, and it all comes in the last 2 weeks. Both very deserving names, Matt, but the more impressive feat of that is that Crosby continues to do it even on a team in the Penguins that is a bottom feeder right now in the Metropolitan, just 3 points ahead of last place, a minus 55 goal differential, which is the worst in the Eastern Conference and would be top 5 in the NHL. Hasn't mattered for Crosby, and after that feat, he continues it with adding a hat trick over the weekend on the road in Dallas. The Penguins go in and upset the Stars in what was a must-have game for Dallas, who's been rock solid on home ice.
Yeah, and again, I don't want to start doing the comparison game and bringing levels down. I think a lot of people who've heard me on this show know exactly my opinions on the whole Crosby Ovechkin thing, but it's definitely something that I feel like really goes under the radar. I think Sidney Crosby is just such a generational player, and he's always made everyone around him better. Even in those years where he was, obviously winning cups, like he still had some guys who aren't, I'm not going to say bad hockey players, right? But like he was never playing with Malkin on a line typically, right? Like he never had like superstars around him. He just elevated himself. He elevated his line mates. He elevated the entire team around him. I would love to know how brutal this Penguins team would have been over the past 3 seasons without Sidney Crosby, because you look at the rest of their line chart and it's abysmal. Their defense has been really struggling, especially this season, right? You haven't gotten the best version of Chris Letang. You obviously haven't gotten the best version of Erik Karlsson. And then you've got, some middling NHL players to kind of fill that out. The goaltending has looked putrid all year. You had a weak stretch of Tristan Jarry that you thought maybe was going to be something. He's back to his AHL caliber skill right now. So it's a disservice for sure for Sidney Crosby to not have a competitive team around him towards the final back tail of his career, especially when you see a guy like Ovechkin having such success with the Capitals this season. It really is unfortunate. And part of you hopes to see maybe Crosby make a move over to Colorado and get to play with the Nova Scotia boy and Nathan McKinnon there. But at the same time, right, like he just year in and year out is a top 10 player in the league. And every year they say it's going to slow down. Every year injuries are going to be an issue. And this is finally going to be the year where we don't see Sidney Crosby be an amazing player. I mean, he's 11th in the league in points. He's played 75 games. Like, he is arguably, and I would make the argument in a very strong case, he's the best player of our generation. And I'd love to see if Connor McDavid can kind of move him past in terms of just overall game and overall talent. But if you look at it from all 200 feet of the ice and the impact that he's had on the sport of hockey, I think Sidney Crosby has just been an unbelievable blessing for this league.
Either of those names, the accomplishments there, to surpass them, you not only are going to have to be the incoming greatest of all time, but they've relatively both been able to stay healthy throughout their entire careers. Crosby had a little bit of that concussion problem early in his career, but since has been pretty much healthy throughout the last decade. Ovechkin has hardly missed any games with the exception of the 6 weeks he was out earlier this year. Didn't stop him with 41 goals in 61 games played. An outstanding feat for each of those guys, and snaps to them. Brad Marchand is a Florida Panther officially, and as the Florida Panthers start to come to health now, Matthew Tkachuk back skating. Barkov is on a little bit of a get-to-health conditioning stint as they're holding him out of the lineup. Our guy Nico Sturm, unfortunately, banged up and not playing, but all around the Panthers are looking like they're going to be back to Cup form in the next couple of weeks, just in time for the playoffs to start. Marchand kicked off his time as a Florida Panther with an assist on the power play in his first game. He was a +1 there. But since then, no points over the last 4 games, -3 being -1 in each of the last 3 games, and not much production coming. The Panthers were shut out today and against a Red Wings team after being shut out a night ago by the Ottawa Senators. So back-to-back games with no goals for the Florida Panthers, Matt. And is that any concern to you, or is it kind of a, bat a lid to it, push it to the side, and wait till all the guys are back and they're fully firing?
Well, first of all, when I did see this note on the note sheet prior to our recording, I felt like you were really taking just a knife and put it right in the chest, and then just like dragged it down my torso at this point, having to not only tell me about how amazing of a debut Marchand had, but the fact that he is playing games with the Florida Panthers. Like, I saw a picture of him in the jersey the other day. It was painful. But besides the point there, I think the Panthers are definitely going through a tough time. When you are missing 7 of your regulars in the lineup, it's going to be a difficult stretch to get through. But this kind of reminds me of how Vegas has gone into the playoffs the last few years, and especially when they went into 2023, right? Mark Stone was on LTIR, and there were some guys that were in and out of the lineup throughout the entire end of the season. They weren't their best version in March, and they weren't amazing at the start of April, right? But if any team's going to get hot, it's a team that A, plays a playoff style like the Panthers, and B, has done it before. They made the Cup Finals in 2023. They won the Stanley Cup last year, and it's mainly the same core that's been going through this entire process. The one thing that I do think is an interesting caveat here is they've let themselves fall in the standings to not only not having that first round wild card matchup and having to play a team in either Tampa or Toronto, which is currently looking to be like Tampa Bay, but they've lost that home ice advantage as well. And I think that's going to play a huge factor going into this tournament, especially if Toronto is the one that ends up getting the 2 seed in the Atlantic there. Obviously, with Tampa and Florida being so close, I think it's going to be pretty much a home atmosphere for both teams in both rinks. But I think if Florida gets themselves into a Game 7 and has to travel up north to Toronto, that's going to be a much more difficult task than if they're going to be able to play at home and have that crowd. Because honestly, Florida's been an amazing playoff crowd the last few years. Like, they really get after it, especially coming April when the weather gets a little too warm to be outside and they got to go into an ice rink to cool off. So I think they've put themselves in a situation where they're going to have to play a much tougher team in the first round, but you got to beat the best to be the best. And I think regardless of when they're going to have to play either Tampa or Toronto, if they want to win the cup again this year, they're going to have to go through some tough teams at the Atlantic. So I think in that sense, yes, it might hurt them, but I'd be interested to see how we're talking about this team 2 weeks from now and see how healthy they are going into the playoffs, and if this could be another similar LTIR Vegas situation where they get their guys healthy at the right time and they start to click again.
Well, out from today's game, Kachuk on the IR still, Kulikov out, Ekblad still suspended. He'll be back during the first round. Sturm is day-to-day, should be back soon. Barkov out. They also held out Reinhart and Sam Bennett over the weekend. So it's, as you mentioned, tough to kind of judge that, but boy, are they going to have some firepower when all those guys get back. When you add those names alongside Brad Marchand, Sam Miskevich, who's been rock solid, Carter Verhaeghe, Evan Rodriguez, and Paul Maurice basically has the world at his hands, no matter what line combinations he wants to throw out there. It's almost like crafting a fantasy roster the way we do so well until the playoffs, apparently. Hopefully for his sake, the injuries don't come down on his teams like they did to us.
And really quick here too, another guy that I think could make an impact on his team that we'll talk about a little later is Jack Devine, who's playing at Denver right now. They're obviously in the Frozen Four, so he hasn't been able to make the sign over, but I think he's a prime candidate too to slot into a middle six role and give some firepower into that offense if they do end up having some injuries that they need to start to replace.
John Tortorella got himself fired 1 week ago in one of the most baffling series of post-game quotes to in-house action. It started after a loss where Tortorella in the media says, quote, "I'm not really interested in learning how to coach this type of team in this type of season where we're at right now. The job falls on me. I have to do better." Well, that transitioned into Tortorella being nixed. Originally, it was reported that he was stepping down. The Philadelphia Flyers come out and say, no, that's not true. He was fired. And Matt, it was kind of a head turner immediately when this quote came out. I did not see the firing coming in, and it came in two ways, because when you first see it at first glance, it's like, woof, yeesh, that's not a great look. But when you kind of dig deeper, I felt it was more a moment where he's saying, you know, I gotta get the team going, and I gotta kind of develop these players. Not quite how Philly saw it, though.
You know, it's funny that you mentioned this. When I was thinking about it in my head, it's one of those things where Tortorella is a very polarizing coach in the sense of, if they're winning, it's all fun and like, maybe not all fun and games with Tortorella, but right, like, nobody's having an issue if this Flyers team is in the thick of a playoff hunt right now, right? Like, Tortorella was a coach of a lot of good Rangers teams that, you know, I don't know if they never ended up getting over the needle, but they were a very competitive team when Tortorella was the coach there. And he comes to Philly and they're not winning, and it's you know, it's a tough spiel to hold on to as the tough guy, making them do all the conditioning and being super hard on players, especially young guys with a lot of skill, scratching guys for questionable reasons. That doesn't fly if you aren't winning games. At the end of the day, your job is to win hockey games with the guys that you have. And if you don't believe in your guys to win hockey games, which it seems like kind of where Tortorella ended up falling at this point, like, you need to see the door immediately, right? Like, at the end of the day, it's his job not only to go out and get the best out of everyone, but make guys want to win, make guys want to play for you, make guys want to play for each other. And I think that's kind of the disconnect there, where if you're not winning games and you're coaching like John Tortorella, you're going to see the door a lot quicker than you think.
Listening around the media outlets, between Elliot Friedman on 32 Thoughts, between Ray Ferraro and Darren Dreger's podcast, Spit and Chicklets, all those guys, it seems almost unanimous that everybody believes this is not the last time we've seen John Tortorella on a coaching staff. It comes out later that somewhere in the midst of the last 2 weeks, there was an interaction with Cam York where Tortorella told York, if you re-sign here, I will bury you. And that would not be the first interaction like that. You think of the way he's treated Mitchkov since he's come over, and going back to last year, pulling the captaincy, benching guys for no reason. Why in the world would a team consider hiring him? I know he's a Hall of Fame guy. He's got the Stanley Cup champions, but with the modern player and over the past years, it has not worked with John Tortorella. If you're an NHL GM, is there any scenario you would bring this guy back? Because for me, I would go nowhere near him unless I was already in an absolute dumpster fire situation where maybe that's the last ditch effort to try to, whip the guys on the rear and get them going. But I can't imagine, one, that he would want to go back into a rebuild after what just went down in the comments he made. But two, if you're a contending team, why would you bring him in?
If I'm a GM, absolutely not. It sounds like he is the worst thing for any sort of developmental player, right? Like a lot of teams that are bringing in young guys and giving guys opportunities. If you're not playing the Torts way, you're not playing. It's funny you mentioned, like, who could ever bring a guy like this in and, like, it could maybe work. And I'm thinking about the Bruins, and I'm like, you know what? Like, Don Sweeney and Cam Neely and all of ownership and management are pretty cutthroat the way they are. And, you're trading Marchand because he wants like $1 million more than you're willing to give him. And you're trading him to a contender for not even a first round. Like, if you're going to bring a cutthroat guy, which I think is a complete 180 from what Joe Sacco's been so far in terms of like the interim head coach in Boston, and clearly it's not working. Obviously they sold house, but they've been losing games left and right here. Like, they're asking to do it on purpose. So if any last ditch effort, could you not see Tortorella with the spoke B on his hat? But again, as somebody who now is a pseudo rooting for the Boston Bruins individual that's in the Boston area, I'm still going to be a Sharks fan at heart. Don't you worry. But as a pseudo Bruins fan here, like, I would hate it. Like, I would be like, God damn it. Like, we're doing this crap again. Like, it's going to be miserable. But at the end of the day, he does have a Hall of Fame track record. Who's going to be a better coach that you can bring in terms of winning hockey games? I understand there's a whole other element of it with the modern hockey player. But if you look strictly at the coaching market right now, other than maybe David Carl, who I don't even think thinks about leaving Denver, especially if they go and win another national title here, who else are you going to get that's going to bring you as many potential wins as a guy like John Tortorella?
Well, and talk about a team that is absolutely lost right now, playing with no motivation at all other than thinking forward to when the golf clubs are going to be warming up in 2 weeks from now. The Boston Bruins, 10 straight losses, the first time in Bruins history that's happened. That did not slow them down from putting an absolute wampusing on the Carolina Hurricanes, a 5-0 Saturday night victory. But yet, Matt, a team that was 3-4 points out of the wild card spot at the trade deadline, sold off their captain. How big of an impact, thinking back to that as well, long term is that going to have that now Marchand's not there and they, the fans still have hope that he's going to re-sign. Sounds like that's a done deal. He's not coming back. What a mistake could that have been, not bringing him back just from a cultural standpoint. Look at how disheveled all of a sudden the Bruins have become. They are now a point behind the Buffalo Sabres in the standings, and they are dead last in the East.
I mean, if you're going to tank, do it right. I mean, there were a lot of teams that were kind of right in the middle of the pack at the deadline and didn't really make many moves. I'm looking at a team like Anaheim, who's already been eliminated. I'm looking at a team like Utah in the West, and then you look at the East, right? Like, the Islanders kind of sold off, but they sold Brock Nelson, but they didn't really do any much more than that. The Rangers kind of stayed put. The Blue Jackets kind of stayed put. Detroit kind of stayed put. Montreal kind of stayed put. Only one of those teams is going to make it, right? And the Bruins were in a spot where they were 2 or 3 points back of a playoff spot, but they had 3 games more played than every other team there. They were not getting the play out of Jeremy Swayman that you would hope when you sign him to that massive extension. I still think there is something there with Swayman. Obviously, you have an off season here and there. It's what goaltenders do, right? Unless you're Andre Vasilevsky or Connor Hellebuyck, like it's going to happen. That defense just didn't have a ton of structure to it. They stopped playing Bruins hockey. The middle six couldn't get a goal. and like this team just was still trying to hang on to what they had when they had Bergeron and Chara and Krejci, and they all left, and they kind of, they had that miraculous season where they won the President's Trophy a couple years back, and you're like, okay, maybe this isn't a time where we really have to rebuild, but at the end of the day, like they didn't have it, and it was finally time to kind of sell house there, and I think it was a huge, interesting decision. I'll say we'll see how it impacts long term, but like, getting rid of Marchand is definitely a choice. I think he got as much value as he could for a guy who had just gotten injured a couple of days before. And again, I didn't love the trade, but again, we moved on when we're past that, trying to retool some assets here. But I think this offseason is going to be super pivotal for Boston because it's going to really tell us if they're going to try and go into a natural direction where they're just going to start dishing out contracts and hope for the best, or if they really start to tank and kind of retool the kit here as they are in the hangover phase from their glory days in the early 2010s.
Well, two markets that have fired coaches in Boston and Philadelphia, and maybe now on to an upcoming firing with Patrick Waugh and the incident that went down 5 days ago. Anthony Duclair is now no longer with the New York Islanders after Patrick Waugh's post-game presser. Duclair taking some time away from the team to think about his future. And after the game 5 nights ago, the quote from Patrick Waugh with emphasis and repetition, quote, "He was god-awful. He was god-awful. He had a bad game. That's why I didn't play him." Deserved or over the line?
It's tough. I didn't watch the game, so I didn't see how bad Anthony Duclair really played. I watched plenty of Sharks games where he played pretty bad, but I don't know if publicly that ever really needs to be said. I do think it's just really interesting that for some reason it feels like this is the year of quotes. Like I feel like not only have players come out with just some absurd quotes, but even coaches and coaches of teams that are in the hunt, right? Like, I don't know if you heard the quote, I'm going to look it up right now, that Sheldon Keefe said about Jonathan Kovacevic. Oh my God, I'm going to find this quote.
That's another great one.
And I don't think we've talked about it.
It was totally misconstrued by the reporter that made it seem worse. I'll find the quote as well. I'll find Kovacevic's quote. You look up Keefe's, but it was the reporter asking about it. Oh, he said that? Well, he's going to play better. And then he ends the press conference right away.
Oh, yeah.
Let's see.
I got the quote up because I wanted to go in chronological. So we'll let you rip yours first because they asked Kovacevic about pretty much like how is the season going? Like, how do you guys gear up for the playoffs now? You guys have been on a little bit of a skid. And they asked Kovacevic, and Casey did so. What did he respond with?
We have a home heavy schedule the rest of the way. We're in a fight, and hopefully that gets us into the playoff mentality. But these results are tough. And the best one I heard about this was Ray Ferraro breaking down why this probably happens. And he says you get coaches and you're in these situations where you're in a losing locker room and the coach is trying to fire the guys up. And it's just like the cliche interviews that guys give, but they're using those click words. And he said playoff mentality is probably something that's been spewed around the room. So he's just emulating that to the press. Well, then that reporter goes straight to Keefe and says, well, all of a sudden Kovacevic is saying that you guys need to play with a playoff mentality. What do you think about that?
He goes, Kovacevic just needs to play better. That would help. Walks off stage.
And then he leaves. He walks out of the room, ends the press conference, and the way he storms out looks like he probably walked into that locker room and just tore Jonathan Kovacevic an absolute new one.
He probably called him on the way out. He probably had he texted one of the assistant coaches yeah, get Kobe in my office right now. It's just really interesting to see. It's just a lot of coaches and players and it's just diva season in the NHL this year. There's a lot of drama. I hope I know the NHL face-off series is coming back out for season 2 this year. I hope they capture some of it because it's just been just gold. I mean, just straight comedy coming from all angles. I think to answer your original question, I don't think there's any reason that Patrick Waugh needs to just completely tear out Duclair like that in the public. Probably not your best idea if you're a coach. if I were a coach, and I'm not obviously, I probably wouldn't be one of those guys that's just like, yeah, no, he sucks. He's just not very good at the sport. That's probably why I didn't play him. I mean, to be fair, could have been warranted. Duclair hasn't had an amazing season by any means, but again, he's a top 6 guy on your team. Like, do you really think that's the best way to motivate him when you're in that push for the playoffs? So for me, I'm probably not somebody who's going to be making those kind of commentaries on my players, but definitely as a fan, it brings some comedy gold, and hopefully Duclair does get some time to ship himself out of New York and find a better situation for him in that case.
Let's close off the NHL talk before we transition to the Frozen Four and look at the races. There are 5 to 6 games left. Some teams with 4, and a minute few who have 7 games left in the season. But as we look at the playoff standings, Ottawa just about clinched, 11 points in hand on the New York Rangers and the Detroit Red Wings, who are both chasing Ottawa with 5 games left. The Rangers and Red Wings have 6 to go and 11 points. So Ottawa would have to lose out completely. They could get 1 point in an OT loss, but a win would clinch, or a loss from the Rangers or the Red Wings would also clinch the Sens playoff berth and Maddie's trip to the North Country upcoming. And while we watch Brady Tkachuk, so I might as well
Here it comes. God damn it. Here it comes. Yep. There's the hat.
Yeah, baby.
There's the
Go
hat.
Sens go here. The Sens are in. The Montreal Canadiens all of a sudden are on a tear. 83 points. They are 4 clear of the Rangers and Red Wings. All 3 of those teams have 6 to go. Matt, who gets in?
Hard to not say the Rangers, just given the quality of that team and the goaltending that they have. A very large advantage over Montreal and Detroit in that aspect. I'm always somebody who, when it comes down to tough hockey games, you need your guy to make saves behind you. So I'm still kind of holding on to that Rangers hope. I think if any of the 3 teams are most likely to make some noise in the playoffs, I think it's also the New York Rangers, just based on their precedent and kind of who they have on that roster. But Montreal is really starting to move, and when a team gets hot like this in April, it's really tough to slow down. So it'll be interesting to see how these last 2 weeks kind of play out for both teams. I think, even if the Rangers get in, they're probably disappointed with this season, and even if Montreal doesn't make it, they're probably very pleased with this season. So I think it's one of those things where I think sometimes that motivation might be the deciding factor and gets Montreal into that first playoff berth in quite some time, maybe since they made the Stanley Cup back in 2020 in the bubble. Trying to remember if they had made it prior to that, but I think either way, it's going to be a really interesting down to the wire. And don't count out Detroit. I think they're still hanging in there. They've been playing some decent hockey recently, but I think if I had to pick one, it's probably the Rangers. But again, I don't love any of the 3 teams kind of going into it, to be fair.
The Senators are hot on the heels of the Florida Panthers. Both teams with 5 games to go. The Sens at 90 points, Panthers at 92 points. And we just talked about the skid Florida's on. Looking at last 10 games, Florida 3-6-1. The Sens have points in 7 of their last 10 games and 2 big-time wins this weekend. Do you see the Sens sneaking into a matchup against Tampa Bay? And how would that be that the Toronto Maple Leafs win the division outright and still have to play a wild card Florida Panthers team? I think that might be what I'm rooting for, actually, now that I say it.
I mean, let's think about it though. Like, who would you rather play right now? As crazy as that sounds, who would you rather play right now? This Ottawa team who has been very hot and is going to go into the playoffs with absolute buzz and absolute energy.
Press record right now. Clip it.
Or would you rather play a dinged up team that hasn't played together in a month and a half, and you have questions about how all those pieces are going to fit together? And in Florida, I mean, as 180 as I might have gone from the beginning of the season to now, like, when a team gets hot like this, like it's going to be tough to stop. And the thing that's different from them, from some of the other teams that we just talked about that kind of got hot towards the end of the year, like Linus Ullmark is a Vezina caliber goaltender. And I think if he plays up to his goaltending ability, I always go back to goaltending, but it really does make a huge impact. I think with a step up in goaltending last year, you probably see an Edmonton team win a Stanley Cup. So I think for me, like, do you rather want to play Ottawa? Do you rather want to play Florida? Like, at the end of the day, you're going to have to win the games regardless. So I think if you're Toronto, if you're Tampa, if you're one of those top two teams, like, you're taking who you're getting and you're going in with some firepower ready to go win. But I mean, Toronto's looked like one of the best teams in the league the last month and a half. Like, they points in 9 of their last 10. They've won 4 straight. Like, they look really good. They're 25-14 at home. Like, that's gonna be a tough out, to be fair. But again, you're either gonna get to play an Ottawa team that's looked really solid recently, or you're gonna play a Florida team who won the Stanley Cup last year. So I don't know if either draw is great in the Atlantic. We've been talking about it all season, how much of a bloodbath this is gonna be. And as it comes down to the wire, it might not be the 4 teams that we thought, but again, 4 very strong teams kind of going into the playoffs here.
I'm going to take Montreal to get in. I think they're an upset candidate as well. I would love to see the Rangers-Washington rematch. I just don't think they've got enough push at the end here. And with how hot Montreal's barn has been, they've got a home stretch upcoming to close it off as well. The Rangers just 4-5-1. The Red Wings 5-4-1 in their last 10. And the Columbus Blue Jackets 6 straight losses. They're 6 points out. And it looks like that is going to do it for the magical run that they've been on. Shift it to the West. How about the 12-0 St. Louis Blues out of absolute nowhere and from the gulag, now pressing potentially a spot in the number 3 if they can keep rolling. They're 5 points back of Colorado. I think that's going to be a little too far, but again, a nightmare matchup if you catch them as a wild card team. How about a Vegas team that could put up 110 points and have to go up against a team that has won 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 in a row, or 16 of their last 18 to close off the season. The Blues seem like they can't lose.
It's I want to say there was an episode a few weeks back where I was hyping up the Blues. Jim Montgomery knows how to freaking win, man. I'm happy for him, but I'm not so happy that the Bruins got rid of him. I mean, it's pretty disappointing there. But back to St. Louis, I mean, yeah, you win 12 straight. Like, this is the time to be a good hockey team, and you're getting great goaltending out of Jordan Binnington. I think Four Nations Binnington is back. Like, I think he might be just like a clutch goal. He might not be like an amazing goaltender, but he's a Stanley Cup winning goaltender, and he's already done it. And I think he can definitely do it again. Like, this team is super hot right now. I don't know. I think it does benefit them if they do end up getting wildcard 1 and getting to play out west, right? So you're not playing through the Dallas, Colorado, Winnipegs of the world. You're playing through Vegas, the Canes, and the Oilers, who the Oilers have looked kind of shaky recently, just in general. I mean, their last 10 have looked solid, but
Draisaitl down this week too.
It's they're definitely an interesting story to talk about going into the playoffs. But I mean, St. Louis, I mean, easily the hottest team in hockey right now, and I mean they're winning games. At the end of the day, like, really all that matters here. So it'll be interesting to see where they draw and kind of if they can continue that momentum into the playoffs. But if they get great goaltending out of Binnington, like, this is definitely a team to look out for.
4 games to go for the Minnesota Wild. They sit at 91 points. 6 points back with 6 games to go is the Calgary Flames team that just won't quite go away. Is there any chance for the Flames to catch the Wild, who have been sputtering a little bit as of late? The Wild 4-4-2 over their last 10 games. Calgary with points in 8 of the last 10.
It would be an absolute disaster if the Wild fell out of here. This is a team that was second in the division for quite some time. We were talking about, all right, they're going to get a 2-3 matchup that you might like coming out of there. And then Winnipeg, Dallas, and Colorado all just absolutely load up at the deadline. The Wild lose so many games in March. They've just fallen off of a cliff. And I think at the end of the day, they do end up sneaking into that wild card too. But now you're stuck. Instead of potentially getting, a Vegas or getting into that 3 spot in the West and playing that, like, you're going to play Winnipeg. And I hate that matchup if I'm the Wild, right? Like, arguably, not arguably, so far statistically, if we look at points, they're the best team in hockey this year. And I think their play backs that up. They're 28-10 at home. Like, you're not beating them for 2 games at home. So then you're going to have to steal a game at home and win all of yours in Minnesota. I think it'd be too tough of a task for a team that's been sputtering towards the end here. And even if Calgary is the one that gets in, like, again, I think it's just too big of a mountain. I think Winnipeg is a very strong, deep team this year.
I was so impressed. Watched a lot of hockey over the weekend, and I'm finally ready to say that the Jets are a powerhouse threat in the Western Conference and certainly could be a Stanley Cup favorite. I've got them easily walking out of the first round this year. It could be just like last year's Capitals-Rangers series, 4 or 5 games, and they might be able to rest up. That offense is nasty on the potency that they can score. And, oh, by the way, defensively, Connor Hellebuck is behind you there. It's going to be exciting to see down the stretch here. And next time we talk, we'll have the official playoff bracket and maybe look back on our preseason predictions. That was my horribly cold take, was that the Winnipeg Jets were not making the playoffs. And, oh, yeah, I had the Boston Bruins as a potential division. I had the Boston Bruins as my Atlantic Division winner, and I had the New York Rangers as the President's Trophy winner. That did not go well. I'm going to clip up some of that episode and go through our terribly worst takes from the preseason and see just how on it. And George Bannister's Colorado Avalanche nowhere near the cut line, as they are going to be waltzing their way towards another playoff appearance. Let's shift it over.
Maybe clip one or two good ones in there from each of us. Give us a little bit of ones. Yeah, give us a little bit of, like, look, we knew what we were talking about. The Sharks are going to be the worst team in the league. I was ready.
I don't think that's what you said, Matt. I do not think that's what you said.
I just said it right there. Clip that
one. One of the clipped ones, as the Calgary Flames are still in the hunt. Matt projected Calgary to be under 50 points this season. They've nearly doubled it. 83 currently and counting, with some time to go. NCAA Tournament. The Frozen Four is set. Penn State ready to go against Denver, Western, and BU. And that'll be a week from now. Let's back it up. Some crazy upsets in round one. And Matt, let's start with the Penn State side. They were a 4 seed advancing all the way through. But was it an unfair advantage for Penn State, who played in Allentown, Pennsylvania? Maine had to travel to what was basically a Penn State home game to get trounced in round one, and then an outstanding Penn State versus UConn game. Both teams bidding for their first ever Frozen Four. It goes to overtime, and Penn State with the clincher. An awesome game to watch. All around, the quarterfinals were phenomenal, but that one specifically. But as you get past the celebration, looking back, was that a miss by the NCAA and maybe a bit of an unfair advantage for the 4 seed to send the one down to Allentown, PA, right down the street from Penn State?
Unfortunately, it's just how they have the tournament set up every year. They've got these host sites 3-4 years in advance. So if in 2028, if RIT does end up making the tournament, they will get home ice advantage at Blue Cross Arena. So be ready for that, on the lookout at our radar, Ditzel. But no, it's definitely a flaw in the way they have it set up. And I think Denver coach David Carl had a pretty long speech about giving home ice advantage to the higher seeds. I think his proposal would be to split it up into 3 weekends instead of 2, and having a home game for each team in the first 2 rounds. So obviously the 1 seed, if they won their first 2 games, or their first game, the second game would also be at home, and just giving the higher seed a home game. I think we look at the way college hockey operates, and those atmospheres for home games are a huge factor. And I think similarly to how college football has structured it to have some playoff games in home environments, I think it'd be even more of an advantage in college hockey. I think it would also just bring such an energy to the rink that it's tough to have when you're doing all of these neutral site locations, right? Like I think it's great to grow the game and have these regionals in Toledo, Ohio, right? And I was up in Manchester, New Hampshire for the regionals last weekend. But again, like that rink was 55-60% full up in New Hampshire for the Providence Denver game. Like if that game is in Providence, which would have been the host for that 8-9 game, you absolutely bet your ass it's going to be a sellout crowd, right? Can you imagine the crowd that would have been in Maine for that Maine Penn State game? Those Maine fans are psychotic. And it would have been, I don't even know if Penn State would have had a chance in that game, but obviously this is kind of the way it's structured. I think hats off to Penn State. They've been one of the hottest teams in the second half. A Matt Leonardo call on the last episode, if you don't recall, put that one in instead of my Sharks clip. But no, I mean, hats off to Penn State. They've looked great in the second half of the year. They're still kind of firing off, and they actually got BU coming up on Saturday, who looked like an absolute wagon against counter Big Ten team Ohio State. So I'm a little nervous if I'm Penn State going into that, seeing them kick the absolute tar out of Ohio State, and then they end up getting the upset draw and playing Cornell in the second game there. A great game as well that I believe went to overtime. So, BU is one of the hottest teams in hockey as well right now, so it's going to be a really great game either way. But I think they should. I do think they should change it to have some home ice, because almost every sport has some sort of element of home advantage in the playoffs, and I think why not bring that in college hockey, in a sport that is super driven by student sections and kind of the energy that a crowd can bring there.
When you think from a revenue standpoint too, the Chicklets guys were arguing about the Hockey East Championship should be a home ice scenario, and look at what Michigan State did in the Big Ten Championship. That atmosphere was through the roof in that whiteout game there. But then saying, well, TD Garden sells out and how awesome that is. Okay, kick that out. But as you mentioned, these neutral sites, Penn State had no problem getting to Allentown. But aside from that, you're looking at some places. St. Louis last year, when they held it at Lindenwood, was around 25% for the first round. That would not happen if you hold it like last year at Clarkson's Cheel Arena for a women's quarterfinal game had 2,400 in the stands, which is unheard of. Or Lina Rink, which has a good crowd to start with, but they sold over, I think it was 3,500 tickets for their women's quarterfinal. Now put that on the men's scale. Imagine how raucous some of these environments could get. And then you put that in a North Dakota, a Denver, Western Michigan, UMass. We went there earlier this year, but those big rinks that have double-decker bowls, you're going to get those be some of your one seeds. Those places, Conti Forum. Can you imagine a home playoff game in Conti Forum? But it was not a good year to be a one seed. The lone one seed moving on is Western Michigan, and boy, do they look like a powerhouse. But it took overtime to get past UMass, and a bummer for our buddy Nathan Strauss, his Minutemen, after an overtime win to kick your Gophers out 5-4, knocked out in double overtime to Western Michigan. Or excuse me, it was a regulation win 2-1. I'm looking at double overtime Western Michigan to beat Minnesota State, but a 2-1 victory in regulation as Western Michigan moves on. The only one seed, though, Boston College topped in the national championship rematch against Denver 3-1 in what was a high-hitting, high-flying game. Some suspect calls in that one, though. I thought there was the miscellaneous icing call with the trip late there, a couple of what looked like penalties that went uncalled. Matt, is that just playoff hockey in your mind, or would you have liked to see a couple whistles to put Boston College on the power play late?
Well, it was interesting too. I was at the first game they played against Bentley, and even that officiating was kind of questionable. Bentley, by all means, they played an unbelievable game. I think the score ended up being 3 or 4-1. I think it was 3-1 that game. But Bentley was in it the entire time. It was a couple of empty netter. Hagen scored with about a minute left to go up 2-1, and then an empty netter made it 3. But again, a lot of questionable calls. The ice was in a really bad shape. I think there were like 5 or 6 delays in the first game there, and then 3 or 4 in the second game there for the pegs not being able to stay in. And there's delays on that front. I think there are some questionable calls in terms of the icing and kind of where the race ended. But to me, I think when you get down to the last 2-3 minutes, it's really tough as a ref to insert yourself into a game like that. When you've got two teams who've been playing physical all day and you haven't called much, it's tough to rationalize making that call so late in the game. A lot of refs do their best to keep, I don't want to say keep control of the game, but in a sense, right? Like they kind of dictate what they're going to allow and not allow. And when you allow a decent amount of stuff, it's a lot harder to make a call than if you're very strict early on and then let something go. So I think they kind of put themselves in that situation where it's been fairly consistent across the game that they're going to let those two teams play. That very physical hockey teams, very veteran-based hockey teams that have been on that big stage, obviously last year playing each other for a national title. So I think from a ref perspective, I think they did the best they could, and I think they did the right thing in terms of if it was super, super questionable, you'd probably eat your whistle there. But at the end of the day, right, yeah, BC had every opportunity to go and win that game. They played a really strong third period and just couldn't get one by Matt Davis, who's looked really good so far in the tournament.
BC and Western, the only 1 seeds that made it out of the first round, and BC had the 16 seed Bentley barely scraped past them, but Denver tops the Golden Eagles. Michigan State upset by Cornell, and Cornell gave all they could handle to Boston University, a 3-2 overtime finish, and it looked like the ECAC had a chance there. How about the Big Red, and kind of a kicker for all of us sitting in Potsdam that we were 1 game away from the potential of that being the Clarkson Golden Knights. But you got to feel for Coach Schaefer in his retirement season. What a run they went on from the 6th seed in the ECAC to a shot away from the Frozen Four.
Yeah, and this was the same team last year that played Denver in the second round out in Springfield. That was at that game last year, and they looked like a very solid team against the team that ended up going on to win the national title. Still led by goaltender Ian Shane, who, again, played very well in both of the games. And it's one of those things where you get to playoff hockey and anything can happen. And if you're a team that plays very similar to how Bentley played, Cornell played the same way, Penn State played similarly, where like you are putting yourself out there for everything. You're putting your body on the line for every shot. You're taking every opportunity you can and trying to make the most out of it. And I think a lot of upsets that drive down at the bottom of these brackets, it comes from teams that are willing to do whatever it takes to get on. And I think when you play a 1 seed or a 2 seed that hasn't been there yet and hasn't felt what it's like to really grind and battle for a game there, right? Like you think about Michigan State's schedule all season. They've been playing in the Big Ten. They've obviously been playing very well. They've been playing good hockey, but they could, in a sense, kind of coast there, right? Like you get through the Big Ten schedule, you're playing the same team 4 times a year. Like you're seeing the same style of hockey. You're getting into a groove of what you know. And then you see just an absolute maniac team in Cornell come at you who has nothing to lose. It definitely shocked them for sure. And it sounds like Augustine's going to go back to Michigan State next year to try and give them another chance at it. We'll see if Isaac Howard does the same, but props to Cornell. I mean, again, like you mentioned, it would have been lovely to see the Golden Knights kind of making that similar run there, but very, very, very good season if you're Cornell going back into the Elite Eight once again for the 2nd year in a row. And hopefully it's a big way for the entire conference and a lot of those smaller schools to be able to continue to build.
The wraps on it here. We've got Denver and Western, Penn State and Boston University. Your Frozen Four picks. You were red hot in the first couple of rounds. Who's the winner? Who's the championship matchup for you?
So we've got a little bit of an NCHC rematch here. Teams that have seen each other quite some time, with Western Michigan going up against Denver. I think Denver's goalie, Matt Davis, is going to be an X factor. He's played unbelievable all season. This is the same team that won the national title last year, and a lot of those guys are back on this team this year. But Western Michigan's got some magic in them. I think they're going to travel super well to St. Louis. It's like a 6.5 hour drive, and and that barn is electric. And I think those fans are going to make it a nightmare for Denver to play there, especially given the fact that they're kind of in the shoes of the underdog for some reason, even though they've played unbelievable all season. They kind of ran the NCHC conference, who, as we see now, two of the four teams in the Final Four coming from that conference, and teams that aren't even making the tournament, like a North Dakota and an Omaha and a Colorado College, who looked fairly solid for most of the season. So I have Western Michigan beating Denver here. I think it's time for a new crown to be given off here. I think the rest is going to help the Broncos, and I think they've got a great team to kind of do it this year. They on the other side, it's been awesome to watch what Penn State's been able to do. Be interesting to see how they travel, but I think we've seen BU play these Big Ten schools. They swept Michigan in the regular season. They beat the living tar out of Ohio State in the first round. I think they're going to get the best of Penn State. Again, they've looked really good. I think they've got a lot of star power. A guy that I know you love, and Cole Eiserman, all he does is score goals, and in big moments too. Like, they won the Beanpot this year, and again, Eiserman was the guy who's putting that puck in the net there. Both Hudson brothers, Quinn and Cole. I know a lot of the star power goes to Cole, but Quinn underratedly top 10 season in college hockey this year in terms of point production. I think he leads in terms of points per game from some of the guys who are playing most of the season. I think BU gets the better of them. And then you've got a great matchup. I think Western Michigan, again, really deep hockey team, some veteran leadership. You got a sophomore and Alex Bump leading the team in points there. And then you got a Boston University team with a freshman goaltender who took over the starting job from Matthew Caron middle of the season. He's played very well, a little bit of shakiness here and there, but again, a ton of star power on that roster. Ultimately, though, I think we see a new champion. I think Western Michigan gets the job done. I think the NCHC has looked really good in non-conference this season. I think the Hockey East non-conference schedule was a lot of teams in the ECAC and the Big Ten, which we saw, none of those teams making the Final Four, with the exception of Penn State, who's on a magical home ice advantage run. So for me, I think Western Michigan gets the job done, but I do think all three games are going to be really good. So I'm excited to watch them.
I'm going to go in the complete opposite direction. I think Denver's a wagon, and Denver's going to advance. I think it's a matchup that has been dominated by Western Michigan throughout the entirety of the year. It's hard to continuously beat a team, and Denver was already upset in the conference championship by Western Michigan. That's going to change in the Frozen Four here. So I got Denver advancing. I think Penn State's Cinderella run continues. I've not been impressed with the Hockey East schools. I think Boston College absolutely laid a flat tire all over the opportunity for them to advance there. I think BU's kind of got the same thing coming. The magic is in the Penn State core, and they're going to move on. The national championship, Denver versus Penn State, and that's where the Cinderella story comes to a close. Back-to-back national championships. Denver has the veterans that have been there. They know how to win, and don't forget about Matt Davis, who you mentioned right there. 5 goals all-time is all he's given up in NCAA tournament games. He's played in 6 appearances, 5 goals against. That is the best all-time. 203 saves on 208 shots against. That's a .976 save percentage. Also number 1 all time among NCAA goaltenders in the NCAA tournament. Matt Davis leads Denver back to the promised land, and they will be crowned champions. Matt, it is Masters week, and let's finish it right here with a Masters update and then maybe your golf pick.
Yeah, so we talked about this last week. We got into a little bit of a tangent, Jake and I, but we've got movement on Movement Saturday here coming out of nowhere. Mason Lohrei on this Boston Bruins demoralization, we'll call it, right? They trade a couple of their blue liners away and are giving Lohrei some more ice time here at the end of the season, and he's doing everything he can. Birdie here, eagle there. He probably put a hole in one on Eamon's corner there on 12. 37 dashes on the season in only 72 games. A very impressive feat. Somebody who we weren't even seeing up at the leaderboard. We were wondering if he was going to make the cut. And here he comes out of nowhere. He's in 3rd place right now at 37 under. Tyler Bertuzzi and Connor Bedard, teammates here on the Chicago Blackhawks, are our top two still. Bertuzzi at -38, Bedard at -39. I think I originally had said that I think Bedard is somebody who's probably the favorite there, in the sense that he's going to be playing 20, 21 minutes a night. And the Blackhawks continue to just look absolutely horrendous. So I will still give him my pick here in his sophomore season for the Green Jacket. I think he was in some good contention last season, and my San Jose Sharks were just too bad, and just had too many contenders up there to not get a Green Jacket last year. But I think for me this year, I think Bedard is in a prime position here. I think, if Morai keeps shooting the way he is on Sunday, though, this could be serious. Couple other contenders that are in the -30 zone is Rasmus Anderson and Barclay Goodrow at 33, and Macklin Celebrini and Steven Stamkos at 31. Stamkos, somebody who's jumped up the leaderboard quite a bit too, trying to find himself in a nice top 5 finisher, get a little bit of extra cash there from the purse. But I think at the end of the day, it's more than likely going to be a sophomore slump in a sense for Connor Bedard and getting himself a Masters jacket here.
Well, Lowry is -8 over the previous 4 games before he went +1 in the 5-0 swamping of the Hurricanes, but -3, -1, -1, -3 in the games before that. Who's your actual Masters pick, Maddie, as we look ahead? I'm a diehard Jordan Spieth guy, but I think it might be Scotty Scheffler's chance, just like the Denver Pios, Scheffler with the repeat.
Yeah, I mean, Scotty's obviously always going to be in contention there. One of the things I always like to look at, there's always going to be live guys who we kind of forget about over there. Joakim Niemann's got 4 wins this season over on the Live Tour, and he's been playing really good golf.
That is
Bryson,
a wild Masters pick out of left field.
I mean, he's been playing some of the best golf on the Live Tour, and like everyone's going to say, oh, Brooks and Bryson, like obviously those two are going to be some really solid hitters, but Joakim Niemann's been playing really good golf. He's been winning a lot of tournaments. My sleeper pick's got to be my guy. I'm a huge Colin Morikawa fan. I always have been. He won the tournament a few weeks back, I believe, or at least was in very high contention for it. I'm pretty sure he ended up sealing the deal on that, though. And I'd love to see him win it. So those are kind of my 2 sleepers. But again, it's hard to go against Scotty. I mean, he plays really good golf every time he goes out there. He's been in contention in most, if not every tournament this season in terms of getting himself in what he's going to call a slump season. But again, he's had very consistent top 10 finishes. He's always going to be around there. And I think when you get to Augusta, it's got to be those guys who have seen the course a bunch and have really performed there. So it's tough to not go with Scotty there.
The Calgary Flames are going to be the worst team in NHL history, and Joakim Niemann is going to win the Masters. Matt Leonardo, everybody. Buddy, it's been a pleasure. 28 episodes up and down. Make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube or Spotify or Apple Music, wherever you digest this podcast. Also, check us out on social medias at Fifth Liners Pod on Instagram and TikTok, at Fifth Line Pod on Twitter, and that is the number 5TH. Matt, it's been a pleasure. Until next time, have a good one, everybody.